Welcome back. At least 15 Pietermaritzburg families were left destitute after the Msunduzi River burst its banks this week. They've now been moved to a local mosque. The provincial government is now trying to find alternative accommodation. Let's get the latest now on that from KZN Cogta MEC Sihle Zikalala, who visited the area on Thursday. MEC, always a pleasure speaking to you. A very good morning. Let's talk a little bit about some of the findings that you encountered when you actually visited the area on Thursday.
No, thanks a lot, and thanks for having us in your program. The first, which is the main cause of this problem, is the area in which the people have built houses. It is area that is exposed to the river, and as Msunduzi, when it rains, get filled, it then spill over to the area, and therefore the houses get affected. In total, about 36 houses were affected, but 15 were damaged to a point where we had to take the communities to a nearby mosque.
MEC, the problem is that these rains, from the looks of it, they're not going to stop, right? We're expecting this kind of rainfall until about December or so. In that regard, you know, KZN as a province is still faced with having to recover from the floods that we encountered earlier this year. And there's still families who still have not been placed in permanent residence. Many of them have been placed in temporary shelters, but have not been placed in permanent residence. So in terms of resourcing capacity, do you at this moment have that resourcing and capacity to allow for those displaced families, including those with the floods that were affected in July or early on this year? But do we have the resources to be able to make plans for these families? Because many of them can't stay in mosques forever. Other ones can't stay in their temporary shelters forever. I do know they've been relocated from certain buildings, moved to others. But you know that it's a temporary measure and a long-term plan is needed here. Do you have the resources for that long-term plan?
Well, while we cannot claim to have enough resources, but we must say that there is a grant that have been allocated by national government for us to temporarily house the affected communities who were affected during the April and May floods. So we do have that, and we believe that the work we are doing is moving with speed to ensure that all of them are housed properly. Those who are not yet in temporal houses are going to be moved soon to houses or to places that we are renting. We're going to lease as a government so that they will live in a decent environment. With regard to these communities, 15 households were affected. They are in a mosque for a period of 5 days, and after that we will try to move them into a place where they will be able to live as individual families, but protected, not in an environment where they were.
Are you on high alert as a local government, especially for this particular weekend, as well as provincial for this particular weekend, in terms of what is to be anticipated from rainfall?
Well, sometimes these rains comes without being notified. If you will follow, especially the ones that came from an affected Msunduzi. So we have taken a view that we keep people alert and our system ready to respond and protect communities.
In terms of just budgeting, MEC, this stuff, as you said, does not happen without some kind of investment. It does not happen without money. Has the money now come out to allow for the permanent sort of and the long-term preparations for such, incidences of emergency? We know that we're in the midst of climate change. We know that when it comes to flooding, we are seeing this localized flooding and the like. It's not something new, but it's going to be persistent. Is there money for all of this, right? And is Treasury coming on board to capacitate the province, especially ahead of the December period, with some kind of resourcing and money, really, more importantly? Is there money?
Well, we will say there is no money that is sufficient. And even the national government had prepared only 1 billion for the country as a whole. And that tells you that it is not sufficient. But as of now, the national government, through Treasury and the Department of Human Settlement, they have provided some money to the province. Treasury have as well provided some money to the affected municipalities, though not enough, but we should report that there are funds that have been allocated for repair of infrastructure and for housing the affected communities.
Then why is it taking so long, though, MEC? And you know, as you're saying, that April, May, that's when we experienced it. Obviously, there was the allocation of budget. They will never have enough money. But because money now has been allocated, it would seem, why is it taking so long to relocate some of those displaced families into permanent housing now?
I think there are two reasons that have prolonged the process. The first reason is that to get money, we needed to do a thorough assessment and then apply to national government for that. They did take a bit of time, but that could not be the main issue. The main issue is that whenever there is a disaster, there is a need of a thorough assessment. The second reason, which is the real problem, is that to get access to land is a problem. We have to buy land from other private sector companies. And that's why we've now taken a view that we will just go and lease some buildings and release government buildings that are not utilized, so that these people will be able to get proper housing.
Yeah, but I'm sure you can appreciate the fact that it's very difficult for families having to stay in these government leased buildings, right? It's not home. In many instances, it's very communal. It almost feels as though you're staying in some kind of a dormitory. And I'm sure as provincial government, you would try to do your best to ensure that people know that their needs are top of mind. It's not something that people can ever be comfortable with, living in these kinds of communal houses.
Well, it is not going to be kind of communal in a sense, because each household will be able to have their own temporal unit where they will be able to stay on their own as a family with a certain level of privacy, which is quite needed, so that the dignity of the people is preserved. So we are trying that way so that we don't keep people in community facilities for long. And that's why we are trying to speed up the process, including getting lease properties.
All right, we'll leave it there for now. Thank you very much for your time, as always. KwaZulu-Natal Cogta MEC Sihle Zikalala just giving us the latest there in terms of those contingency measures that have been put in place to ensure that people have been given, decent accommodation, especially in light of what we're experiencing here with the weather. And also, more than anything else, how do we ensure sustainable as well as long-term housing and permanent housing for those that are already displaced in May, April over the floods? But